And today on What the Funk, we have the Hoove, Jared
Bring
Hoover.
heat in, Jeremy.
Got to be fun, Jared. Got to make it fun. So awesome to have you on. Jared Hoover's somebody I met kind of in the, I guess I'd say toward the end of COVID. It was around late 2020. We grabbed some coffee and really
Yeah,
hit it off. I think at that point you were, who were you working with? Were you still with Kelvin at that point?
he was either at Kelvin or when I left. I had a couple stints at startups and doing some independent consulting. I think that's where you were. Yes, because we had coffee, and you're like, "Yeah, you should do your own thing, man." Like totally.
Yeah, it was either around when I had just started my own thing or I was thinking about it, and we bonded pretty well. I really enjoy the relationship that we've built. I find you to be incredibly authentic. You've got a military background. I think you've got kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. But I'm not going to totally steal all of your thunder. I told you this would be the first question. I'm going to hit you with it. Who are you, man? Who's Jared Hoover?
Oh man, that's the hardest question.
I know, I
Like,
know.
let me put some labels out there, Jared. I'm a dad. I'm a sales guy. I'm a veteran. I'm a one-time engineer. Um, Yeah, and I'm a constant grower, and I appreciate the kind words. I feel like I'm an authentic person, but we'll get into that. So
No question about it. So take me back to the beginning, and definitely want to talk about the military background.
yeah,
But like, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What led you to eventually the military and then a career
yeah,
in oil and gas?
yeah. Windy road. Everyone's got a windy road, right? Grew up in Illinois, Chicago area. Maybe pick up a little bit on that Chicago accent. Did my undergrad at University of Illinois. Studied engineering. It's March Madness time, man. They won their first game, so go Illini.
They look good. We'll see when this podcast comes out. They may still be playing by if they're still playing by the time this comes out, you'll be in a
That
good
is a
seat.
good thing. So
Yeah.
podcast recording, first win, coming off the Big Ten tourney win, which I was super, super pumped about. So yeah, studied aeronautical engineering of all things is what
Nice.
my undergrad. And I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to fly fighter jets. I was in Air Force ROTC. Uh, 80s kid who watched Top Gun too many times, Jeremy. Like that's it.
Were you Goose or Maverick?
Oh, Maverick all the way, man. I wanted to be the front
Yeah.
seater. I wanted to fly the fighter jet. So like that was my goal, man. I was hooked on it. And so that's how it all lined up and was doing Air Force ROTC. And a lot of things mixed to that happening. One, I discovered, well, I knew I would, but I was colorblind, so I couldn't fly,
Ah.
which was definitely bummed me in Air Force world. Like I had my fighter jet slot. I was a senior. I was like, all cool. I was like, this is my, this is what I was going to do. And they're like, yeah, we can't do it. You can't, you can't see color, so we're not going to let you fly. Um,
Wow.
but and also have to look at the mix of the time. My senior year, September 11th happened, like very monumental. Like here, I'm getting ready to graduate, commissioned in the military. The nation comes under attack. So um, for me, it was really the question of what do I like. So what do I do? And luckily, I had some flexibility because I had good standing and good grades, and so yeah, I stayed in the military and got into a career field of it's called security forces. We did the ground defense for air bases. We did military police, kind of like definitely kind of a combatish type of function, ground combatish type of function at the Air Force. So I was very motivated to. I want to say this, not be an engineer. I was 23. I wanted to go fight for our country, type of thing. That was very
Yeah.
much my motivation.
I love it. Okay, so we're then exactly the same age, I think. I was
Probably.
also a
Yeah.
senior in college when 9/11 happened, and I'm not even sure if you and I have talked about this. I was in Lower Manhattan. I think a lot of my
Holy cow.
listeners, yeah, a lot of my listeners probably know that it was super random, but ended up, I went to Brandeis just outside of Boston,
Yeah.
New England kid, but we had this amazing hookup through one of my best friends from college, Dan Locke. His uh, his aunt was a psychic for the COO of Marc Jacobs. Marc Jacobs is a big like shoe and purse like fashion line. And we got to know this COO and we started getting invitations to the Marc Jacobs fashion show. So September 11th happened during Fashion Week. So we went down there probably Sunday, and then Monday was the fashion show. And Andrew Rosen and I talked about this on a podcast a few weeks ago. Got into like all the detail. It was like
Yeah.
surreal stuff. But we're at the fashion show. It's late, and that's Monday night into Tuesday morning. Literally standing on a pier, looking across the Hudson
Totally.
River at the Twin Towers at like 2 in the morning, right on September 11th. We go to sleep, wake up, people are calling our phones. It's all crazy. We load up that we heard there's this terrorist attack right in New York City, a mile
Yeah.
away or less of where we were. Um, which is funny because when we say to New Yorkers, they're like, we were in Lower Manhattan. They're like, where were you? We were in like Greenwich Village. They're like, oh, you weren't like that close. I'm like, yeah, but if you zoom out just a little bit, like we were actually very close. But yes, for you living in New York City, we weren't that close. Okay, got
You were closer than 99.99999% of the entire world.
it. We were close and got out of there. But to bring it back to like the military conversation, of course, there's this like amazing sense of um, pride in country and in military and just I think everybody was shook after that happened. So we're in the car starting to drive back on September 11th back to Boston. And one of our friends was in the Marines. He'd recently enlisted in the Marines maybe a year or so before. And my buddy Dan called him. He said, "Billy, like, how you doing?" He's like, "Yeah, just playing some football with the boys and drinking some beers." And he's like, "What do you mean? Like, shouldn't you be like deploying or like doing stuff?" He goes, "Dan, I'm not going to be able to drink beer and play football with the boys for a long time. So we're going to enjoy this right now."
Totally.
Like,
Yeah,
right,
yeah. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But it sort of stood out like military is going to be on guard. But so yeah, I could see like I mean it even crossed my mind like I would die for my country. That
It
was
was
my
it's
mindset.
hard to replicate, 2 decades plus later, the fervor that, that was surrounding it and to kind of put yourself back in that place. So, yeah, that's an unbelievable story. I mean, I remember getting back from our physical training in the morning, standing watching the TV, like, and watching it happen. So, 100%, man. Yeah, I think it definitely our age group left an impact, right, of kind of changed my life trajectory and a lot of people's. So,
Definitely. And I also think that it changed the economy. It changed the job market, right? So it was pretty challenging for people who graduated school in 2001, 2002, 2003 because the market was impacted, right? The
totally.
stock market kind of crashed later in 2002. There were challenges getting a job. I remember how difficult it was right out of school to find like even an entry level type of job. So I could see where the military would be appealing. So you graduate in what May of 2002, and you just deploy right away.
So I actually had a December of 2002 graduation. I had to go an extra semester because I was an engineer finishing up some stuff. And so then early 2003, I commissioned second lieutenant and I start going through, there's just a series of schools you have to go to. And if you remember kind of back to March 2003, we invaded Iraq.
Of course,
Um, and I remember very much watching it all happen. And I'm in the midst of all of these all these schools and initial qualifications you have to go through. And it was in mid 2003. I was finishing up like all of my basic, qualifications in my career field as an officer. And my commander called me up. He's like, "Hey, I hope you're paying attention. You just got orders. You're heading to Iraq." So here I
whoa,
was, first deployment, 23 years old, and less than, good God, I was 8 months or so in the military. Stepped off a plane and charged a 65 airmen controlling a sector of a base in northern Iraq, and my career was off and running. Definitely a huge pivotal moment, but yeah, kind of like the world just smacked you right in the face at 23. So
oh man, the level of responsibility to have to take on. What was that like when you were on that plane, that military plane, flying over to Iraq? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Were you thinking, "What the hell am I doing?" Like,
I all of the above. I jokingly say like it was the hard. Some of the hardest part was just getting into Iraq. I spent a week like laying on a runway in Qatar trying to like just bum transport rides. But
wow,
I won't forget, man. It was a C-130 like 2 o'clock in the morning. combat landing into northern Iraq, corkscrewing in and dropping down, and yeah, all of a sudden you get out and it kind of hits you like you're here. Okay, let's go to work. So it's all everything you said wrapped in one. Man, you're nervous, you're scared, you're excited. Like there's an aspect like in the military. I talk to people like you train and train and train. Even though I was, I spent 4 years undergrad in ROTC and 10 months train. Like there's a sense of wanting to do what you've trained to do, right? That definitely comes a part of it. So
Yeah. And all this stuff that you've seen on the movies is now you're like, you're living it. You're like, "Wait, this is real. There's no cameras here." Shit, man. This is about to get serious.
it's serious, and I don't know. I look back on it, and I think we've changed. Like society's changed the way they looked at, which I think is great. Like it was very much glorified, and it's like it's not beautiful and wonderful and everything like that. So I think a little bit more reality injected of like this is what it's really like is far better than kind of I think when I grew up in watching Rambo or Schwarzenegger type of glorified movies in the 80s.
Right.
Like that's not it.
Yeah. So, how long were you in Iraq?
I did two tours, 2003, 2005. Each first one I think was 4 or 5 months. Second one was I think of 7, 8 months. So good chunks of both those times. And Northern Iraq first time, Central Southern Iraq on my second tour. Yeah, in 2005. So
So, like, what did you do in between, like, when you
yeah,
came home the first time? What do you do
yeah.
in between?
Yeah, it's like I think it's great. Like so we had like a like how it gets like we would have a mission like on base. Like my home base was Charleston Air Force Base.
Okay.
Charleston's an unbelievably cool town. Anyone ever been to Charleston? Like to be 23, 24, 25, have a little bit of coin in your pocket and be in Charleston was super fun. So
Yeah.
you're training, we're doing a mission. Like interestingly enough, like in between there, I went to went to a school where we would do it was called Raven School, but we do like these flyaway security missions on these because it was a cargo aircraft base, and we would hop on like 2 and 4 man teams on these cargo aircraft and go all over the world because like
Wow.
we drop stuff. So like I would do a bit of that in between, which is super fun. Like flying into Colombia and dropping off like Army Special Forces and munitions and around it was so that like there was a lot of fun stuff to do. I always jokingly say my 20s were like, at least for me, every kid's dream of jumping out, really little boy's dream of jumping out of planes and helicopters and flying around the world. So,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really neat. I mean, I'm getting, like, visuals in my brain of what that looks like, and it probably look different to you because, I'm not colorblind. But anyways, that's a different
It's
part of the
totally different,
conversation.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you
Like everyone says, like they have it, like it's exciting, but like anything, I think military is like 99% sheer boredom and waiting in line, and then 1% of sheer terror type of thing. So
of action, yeah.
of action,
So
yeah, yeah,
so you go back to Iraq, right? So you're loving it, you're
yeah.
living in Charlestown, but Charleston, you're waiting for the call, and then they call you back, and you go to Iraq, and then at this point, it's a little bit more old hat. Like, you've done this before, you're
Totally.
experienced, you're no longer a rookie. You're also 25, 26 at this point, so you've seen some more stuff. You've lived a
Your
little bit more.
prefrontal lobe is hopefully fully developed, or you can make better decisions type thing.
Starting to, at least in my case. And you go back, and you're there for a little bit longer this time. Was that your last tour?
Yeah, yeah. Just did 2 tours there. 100% like you said, it was like, um, even at 25, having 2 tours, most of the people I went over with, this was their first. It was uncommon for me, right? So very much like old guy type of thing, being 25, like tell us how this goes, Jared, type of thing. So very much, it was that way. It was like there's a lot of confidence. There's a lot of like, okay, like I know what I'm doing. I'm not totally walking into the unknown. I know what I want this to look like, and really got to apply a lot of the leadership lessons I learned on the first one and honestly screwed up, like just
Mm,
having no idea of what's going on and just like, okay, this is, I want to empower my people. I want to be trust. This is how I want to communicate. This is how I build a good team of running 60, 70, 80-person organizations
mm,
and doing this and how we're effective. So it felt like it was good because I felt like I got to like clear a lot from my first one and be like, okay, let's do this right the second time.
right.
So yeah, yeah, that was my second and last, and got back and immediately got orders and moved to Montana. So where we were chatting right before the record button. So
Okay, so you get back, you're yeah, 26, right? You're now like a
Yeah.
seasoned veteran at this point, as
Yeah,
still a young
26,
pup.
right? Just a salty old veteran.
Still your hair probably wasn't quite as gray back
No,
then for those that
no.
are watching the video, but maybe it was starting from those tours. So you go to Montana. Did you have, like, a choice of where you wanted to go when you got back? And were you still, like, what, reserve military? Like, what was this what
Yeah,
was your
yeah, like,
setup?
I get, like, all the nuances of, like, how stuff generally, like, as an officer, I would move, you get new assignments every 2 to 3 years, right? And, like, you put your preference, like, "Oh, here's where I wanna go," or, like, "Here's what's open," right? Because there's
Yeah.
only so many spots, like, and they're like, "Okay," and there's a magical black hole that goes in, and you get orders, and I can't even remember what was open or what I had, and like Great Falls, Montana. I don't know if it was like really on the list, like that's like exactly like going from Charleston, South Carolina to Great Falls, like totally total difference. But yeah, so you active duty, and it's like, okay, these are the orders. I'm off. I'm going there. But totally different mission, not deployment. Like if anyone knows it, it's one of the three bases where there's intercontinental ballistic missiles. So like think like war game stuff, like missiles in silos getting ready to turn, like that shit still exists, right? And that's where those are at. So they're kind of scattered all over. And so our job was to do security for those. And um, I will say, like, lucky enough, but also I was always kind of my mentality in the military was like, oh, let's find the coolest, baddest thing I can do and
Sure.
figure out how to do that. Right. So for me, that was, we were standing up we were rewriting the way we do nuclear security. So it was a heliborne assault force. So we flew around in helicopters, snipers and explosives and breachers. Like worst case scenario, someone comes and try and take our stuff. Like we're going to come back with a bigger hammer and take it back or prevent you from taking it. And we were the big hammer. It was fun. So that's what I
Oh,
did.
man.
Yeah, yeah. So I flew around the Montana countryside in helicopters, and yeah,
That's so neat. So you're in Great Falls, Montana, you're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and
100%. Yeah.
so keep the story going, then what?
So Great Falls, Montana. Yeah, it is the middle of nowhere, but like some of my life's tent, like it was awesome. Like total outdoorsy town. Like the like personal stuff. Like I was up in Glacier National Park. I get into skiing, so you can start to
Yeah.
see the connected dots here now. Like why Colorado became an appeal after I got out. So and I spent 3 years up in Great Falls, Montana, and small town. But you know did a lot of hiking, skiing, outdoorsy stuff. I That's where I had at the time my then wife. I met her and we started dating. She was in the military too, and
Ah,
that's where that happened. So yeah, 3 years there, and after that, I picked up, and it was about that time. So I had like 6 years in as I left, and it was like, okay, am I going to stay in? Like, what do I want to do here? Right,
yeah.
right. Kind of getting to the decision point, and I think you're talking about getting a little older here. Now I'm 28, 29, right? So it's like, okay, like the 20s have been fun. We're starting to get the end. Like, what do I want to do? And
Yeah.
um, part of it is like I had always had this desire. Like I love teaching, and I love like my college times in ROTC and students. And I really, after 6 years of deployment and then a lot of a lot of high ops tempo in Montana. If you like, want to get in the military history, like there's a lot of change happening in the military. Like flew some nukes where it shouldn't go, and there's a lot of crackdown on like our procedures. So it's just a lot of stress happening on what we were doing, right?
Mm.
So I was burnt out. I was ready for a break, and I managed to apply and like weasel, I would say, squirm my way out and get approval to like leave our career field, which was critically manned, and be like, hey, I want to go teach. Can I go teach? And I got an
Wow.
assignment, and I got accepted. I went back to the East Coast and taught at the University of Virginia, leadership and management. So for ROTC cadets, like of everything I did, best assignment I ever had in the military. There's still like the students I keep are now like majors in the Air Force, or they've like gotten out,
Ah,
and I still keep in contact with them. Like the best time I ever had, the most fulfilling time I ever had was teaching and mentoring and like taking these college students and like, okay, like, let's turn you into Air Force officers.
that sounds super fulfilling, and I've been to Charlottesville. It's awesome. What a cool
It's such a cool town, right? Yeah.
like it sort of made me jealous when I went there, seeing that it was like what it was as a college town, because that was not my experience. But just seeing like I think the people I visited, they had a friend who lived in a frat house, and the frat houses back there were like mansions. And they're like, "Oh yeah, this is a mansion that Thomas Jefferson lived in like
100%, yeah.
200 whatever 150 years." I'm like, "What?"
Thomas
It
Jefferson is like I look back on it again, like I talked about like Charleston having a little coin in your pocket. Here I am, a captain, like I'm living like right off the university grounds. Like I go running like on the grounds they call it, and like where Thomas Jefferson built. There's so much cool history there. It is like it. Yeah, it stands up. It's a cool university. I didn't realize like I had no knowledge when I was getting into it. Like I moved east. My then girlfriend, ex-wife, she was at the Pentagon, and I was like, oh, okay, I
mm,
want to do this. How do I get to a school out there? And it was
yeah.
closed. And it was it was an unbelievable stumble into it. I was like, this place is awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I remember going to a football game and going to some parties and just thinking like, "This is like heaven." You know, I the I was super jealous of people that went to school there, and just beautiful rolling hills, and the weather was good, especially in the fall. I'm like,
Hmm.
"Man, I can see the appeal of this," and if I were like a good athlete or something and went on a recruiting trip there, I'd be like, "I'm going here. This place
Spot.
awesome."
Yeah.
This is my place. So you've lived like all over, right? So you grew up in the Midwest, and then obviously you were in the kind of the Southeast, and then a little bit further north, and also in Montana. So you're in Charlottesville. You got into teaching, which
Yeah.
is super fulfilling, and you're starting whether you realized it or not. Like you're building an amazing set of contacts. Like your Rolodex is now starting to build up of like pretty serious professionals that are just young, right? And
Yeah.
eventually they'll become, like you said, like
Yeah.
majors in the Air
Yeah.
Force and
Yeah.
all that. Um, so now you're probably into your 30s, right? You're
Yeah.
married, and you're thinking, what's next?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my time teaching was kind of a punt on the decision to leave the military, right? So I'm kind of pseudo in like I'm in the military, but like I'm a university, like like you're really like
Yeah.
life's not that hard, right? But I was I had out like going back to it, I had always had dreams of flying and getting into different like special operations and stuff. And I could never do that because of my eyes. So I kind of made the decision when I was there. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this again and like re-enter this sort of stuff. Like, whereas a more seasoned veteran, maybe they'll let me in. I can get some medical waivers. So I tried for some new career fields and stuff that were coming in the military and some different assignments, and you just couldn't pass the vision requirements. And it was 2 years in, and in like typical ebbs and flow of the military, they're like, hey, if you're a 2002 grad in this career field, we don't need as many. Do you want to take a separation bonus and leave? I was like, I'll take 75K and leave the military. I was thinking about it.
First time you got packaged out.
First time I got 100%. I was like, I'll take the package. Is that the thing?
Yeah.
So yeah, I packaged out. And not, I will say, like having kind of an idea, like in the midst of that, um, like where some of the seeds were born. I started to audit and sit through business school classes at Darden, so great business school at UVA,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I like these people. I like what they're talking about. I don't know anything about the business world, and like what that is. So yeah, it was super cool. So I started to do that, and am I still on here, Jeremy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. I jumped over here. So the I so running at Darden and got the package out, and started to figure out what I want to do. And I was looking at business schools, and trying to figure out if I wanted to go that route, like go back to business school. And I ended up pairing up with a recruiting firm that specialized in recruiting junior military officers, and
Hmm.
I did all these interviews. It was interesting. Like I did 13 interviews over the course of 2 days, like all these different companies. And one of the companies that now you're getting like one of the companies that recruited me was Shell, and they were looking for military officers with engineering degrees to work offshore in the Gulf of Mexico on production.
Oh, you're like, "This is easy. Let's
I
do
can
it."
do this. Like I'll go out here, I'll go do this. So um, that's what I jumped on, man. I said, okay, this sounds like a really so like transition to oil and gas. No knowledge about oil and gas, no history, no nothing. It
Right.
was I like the company. I like the guys I'm working. Like it was all we are all ex-military guys that were doing this. Like they had Navy submariners, Army helo pilots, Marine Corps logistics guys. We're all 4 to 10 year ex-military officers, and Shell was out recruiting them and basically sticking them on platforms in the Gulf and say, "Hey, fix our problems." So
Neat.
that was the lineage, and got out. I mean, personal side, got out, got married to my then girlfriend who I was dating, who I met in Montana, and she was at the Pentagon. And so, like, the job worked out, and I moved up. We lived up in DC, and she was working at the Pentagon, and I would commute down to New Orleans every 2 weeks. I was actually
Wow.
2 weeks off. Yeah, I would fly down there
Wow.
and kilo out.
That's kinda cool. Because I always sort of wondered, I just assumed that people that were, off on these offshore platforms in the Gulf of Mexico just lived somewhere in Louisiana or
Most
Western
of them
Florida
do.
or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. Most
But
of like,
you're
there's a handful of us that did, but I was like, "Well, I can live anywhere." I was like, my wife at the time's up at, DC, and I'll rack up the at the time, US Airways existed, and did the Reagan to New Orleans flight many, many times, man, and kept the car down there
yeah.
and would drive down to the tippy end of New Orleans, end of, the boot of, Louisiana, and helo out and live out there for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's really neat. Did you like working on the offshore platforms?
Did I like it? Like wasn't the right word, right? It was fun. It was enjoy. It was a great introduction, like, to the industry and how stuff works. Like, total cultural shock working with, like, South Louisiana boys, like, great people, but totally different culture. So much fun. And like I was saying, like, people either loved it or they did. Like, they did it for 40 years or they didn't do it. And
Yeah.
um, and I will say, like, I always like part of what I say is like, God, like, this was like, I feel like in America, some of the, like, the last vestiges of like trades. We had like unbelievable electricians and like mechanics that
Yeah.
made killer dough working offshore. And I was like, oh man, this is like an awesome gig. But in the midst of that, I had my first son,
Yep.
and so I'm traveling. I'm gone 2 weeks. My wife at the time, she's working crazy hours at the Pentagon. We've got a nanny. And like a big portion of that and that has shaped my decisions was so firstborn, and he has special needs. And
Okay.
we had no idea. He comes out, and we find out he has Down syndrome. And there's a whole story, and it's been a wonderful change in my life for all the right reasons. I think parenting and fatherhood and parenthood goes. And it was quickly realized that, like, this is not doable. Like, I'm trying
Yeah.
to learn and manage a lot of medical stuff. I've got a nanny raising them. I'm gone 2 weeks, and just 100% not working. So
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's just crazy intense. I mean, you don't expect that, right? You sort of have this vision for what your life will be like and the white picket fence and kids and living in the suburbs and all that. And then they're like, "Oh, by the way, your son, right, has Down syndrome." And you're thinking, "Wow, okay, that's not what I pictured. That's not what I
Mhm.
expected. This is gonna be different." And meanwhile, you're trying to build your own career. So is your wife. Like, you got a nanny, like you said. So this now shifts things. Your whole perspective shifts. You're still a pretty young guy, but you're building out a career. You've got a good
Yeah,
background. Your wife's got a good career. Um, did you basically tell Shell at that point, like, I need to be home more, and I
yeah,
got to do something different? Like, what
yeah.
was that like?
So, yeah, there's like you make some good point. Like, that's life, Jeremy. Isn't that the beauty? Like, you have this vision, and you learn, like, you have so little control over what really happens in your life, right?
Yeah.
And there's beauty and wonder in that. And so, yeah, there was a culmination of decisions, right? So, part of it was my wife is in the military, and at the time, and she's kicking ass. Like, she's like below the zones in promotions. She's lieutenant colonel now, and like she's on track. Like, and she's going to some prestigious schools, and she's on track to be a general officer, right? That she's literally being told, we are grooming you for general officer stuff.
The top of the
Um,
top.
Top of the top, right? And so we have like this like kind of these frank discussions, like where it's like I'll quit. Like maybe I go back to
Yeah.
business school part time. I'll raise Jacob, my son, and it's you. Like let's do it. Like I'm down with that. Like I will figure something out. Like I had this goal of going back to school, and like I can do that. Like, I'll go to Georgetown or something here,
Yeah.
and we'll make this. Well, we'll make this happen. And it was through a lot of discussions. Like, and I give her credit. Like she was just like, I don't want. That's not what I want for my life. Like that's not my goal in life, right? And that took a lot
Mhm.
of guts to be like, here it is. I'm being given something, being groomed for something, and it's. She's like, I never came in here to do this, and so in the midst of that, I talked to Shell and said, "Hey, I can't do this. Like, I'm either going
Yeah.
to quit or I need something else." She applied for early retirement waivers and was accepted.
Mhm.
And we both basically knew we needed to get out of DC and do something. So um, her stuff finished up quicker. Of all things, interestingly enough, the military got the retirement, and we packed up the house, the awesome row house outside, deep right outside DC, very cool
Oh,
urban,
yeah.
row house in Alexandria, Virginia, and
Awesome.
rented it out and packed up and moved west and drove west, and ended up in Breckenridge in a VRBO type of thing for an extended rental. I was still working offshore as long as I got to an airport. Like I was totally good,
Sure.
and kind of under the auspice of trying to figure out like where do we want to live, and it really came down to like Colorado or Washington State, right? She had grown up. We loved the Seattle area, and we both loved Colorado, and luckily enough, my boss at the time, still keep in touch with Virgil, just a great guy, like very one of the most authentic, empathetic people, and he's like absolutely like we need to keep you in the organization and this is not right for you and let's find another spot for you and made some phone calls and at the time Shell had an office here in Denver in the tech center. They ran their Wyoming assets and Colorado assets and sure as shit man I got an engineering job there they before they shut everything down so I ended up to get a transfer which was awesome.
Think I've been to that office before, yeah. That, whoa, okay, there's there's a lot. So you wanted to go west. I could see leaving that part of Virginia being tough. It is really cool for people that haven't been to Alexandria. It's like it
Yeah.
just feels so like fabric of America. Those row houses are freaking awesome.
it,
But you're like, "You know
Dude, it was
what? We need
awesome, but
something
to, like,
different."
raise a special needs kid, oh, man. It was so fun being single in
Yeah.
Alexandria or, like, just 2 people married and working, like, holy crap, man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, you mentioned, like, you guys had met in Great Falls originally to bring it back. So you're like, "The West sounds good." So you end up in Breckenridge. Were you commuting from Breckenridge to the tech center?
No, so, we ended up like, once all this was happening, I don't remember the order, but we bought a house, so we were in Lone Tree outside for those people, like,
Okay.
just, south of there,
South. Yeah.
south, yeah, and,
That was when
yeah.
Lone Tree was considered, like, way out there. Now I feel
I
like I
think it
have
was a
to
bit
know a
like it
bunch
was
of
a bit
people.
still out there. This would have been like 2013-ish or something like that, 2014 type of thing. So yeah, yeah, yeah. 10 years ago
Yeah,
now.
that's when we first bought too in Lafayette, which is, like, East Boulder County, right near
Yeah,
Erie and Weld County, where the kind of the drilling starts in the DJ Basin. But it felt out there too for us, and it feels like sorta like Lone Tree, things just start to move out to you, right? The gentrification happens, and then you start getting all these services and restaurants and, more families moving in and cul-de-sacs and neighborhoods start popping up. So,
mhm,
you've seen that a lot over the last 10 years too. So you're living south, you're working in the tech center, right? You're now like fully a shell guy at this
yeah, I'm
point.
a
You were a
shell guy. Yeah,
military guy and then you became a big company shell guy. So you're like Captain America at this point. So you're you're working at Shell, right? You're raising your son, you're married, you're living in southern, South Denver area of Colorado. Um, I didn't know that about you at Shell. So then, you've got experience in the field, obviously in a number of different disciplines. You've got sort of the educational background, and then you're working in the office for Shell. What happened? They closed the office or sold that asset, and you ended up on the
totally.
tech side. Like,
Yeah, no, totally. So it was like 10 months after I got there. They're like, yeah, we're selling So it's all their Pinedale stuff, right? They had huge stuff on the anticline, and they're like, we're divesting that and we're closing the office. And got just like 10 months I've been here. I was like, "Ah, man, like, and they're like, okay, like, we'll like typical big company stuff, like we'll shut it down. Like, we don't know when it's gonna happen. Like they're telling you, like, oh, this could happen in like 6 to 12. It's like, what do I start looking for a job now? Like what does this mean? Like this is my first kind of
Yeah.
go around of like a asset divestiture, right? Inside oil and gas, right? So I'm like a rookie here of like what that looks like. And Shell, if anything, like great company. I've worked for some big companies. Shell's actually like a really great. They really do like. At least my experience was like a really kind of people oriented. They're always trying to take care of their stuff in the midst of like what they could. Right, it wasn't totally out there. So they're like, yeah, we can get you a job. Like we're moving that team to Houston. Like, do you want to move to
Mm.
Houston? And I was like, no. Like for all the Houston listeners out there, it's like I'm not moving to Houston. Man.
You've
I
also
lived
at
around
this
the
point, like,
world.
yeah, you've moved a lot at this point, and it feels like you're finally settled,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Like Denver's home,
And
right?
then Denver's home, and especially if you're a mountains person, Houston's just not for you. People have asked me a lot too. They're like, "Dude, when are you moving to Houston?" I'm like, "The answer is never." And it's not because I hate Houston. In fact, I kind of like Houston, especially as a business city, and I've got great contacts there, and I love the restaurants, and the winter weather is super mild and nice. But it's just not for me, man. It's a huge city, and you're spending a lot of time sitting in a car, right? And it's I guess in my mind, like even growing up in the Northeast, I pictured myself living in a place like Colorado. I never pictured a place like Houston, right? So it would just feel like to take me a little bit outside of my comfort zone to live in a place like that. Nothing wrong with it. I think I get it for people. If I were to live in Texas, it would probably be somewhere like Austin, just candidly, right? There's some rolling hills, there's a little bit more nature, right? It's a little bit smaller. Houston to me, and it's grown a lot too. It just feels like just a
Yeah.
massive place. But anyways, I could see maybe you had other reasons, but for all the places that you lived, Houston would have been kind of intense, I think.
I think, gosh, I mean, between the military, like San Antonio is a huge Air
Cool.
Force hub, and like traveling like to Houston, and now I've been all over. I've been all over Texas. I've never lived there, but like,
Yeah.
every reason you said is true. I think it's funny. You say you talk to 99 people from Colorado and ask them if they moved to Texas. The only place they'd say would be Austin, right? I think that's what
Yeah.
like everybody would say, like same thing there. I mean, I think a big dynamic of it is, and this is like part of it is personally like me learning of. I don't get too far down the ropes. There is like I have a kid with special needs now. Like this is about like what is best for him and
Yeah.
um, uh, what is the best opportunities for him. And I'll say you start to learn nuances and how Medicaid funding is at states and like where they can get services and where the
Yeah.
best speech and occupational therapists are, where the best school systems are, where the best medical care is. And say frankly, we found like Houston's got great medical care, and through our discovery,
Sure.
like the special needs focus and Medicaid funding and stuff like that in Colorado was stronger, and we
Hmm.
saw a better ecosystem for him here, and that was a huge part of it was what can best support him. So it is a multitude of reasons, I guess, what I'm trying to say there, Jeremy. So I said no, I'm not moving to Houston, and that put me on the job market. And
Yep.
um, I think luckily we're talking pre 2015 crash, right?
Yep.
So oil prices were still really robust. Um, and so Denver has a pretty strong independent oil and gas scene happening there.
Did. It did.
Did. Yeah, we can talk about that, man. So, and like, so I'm coming off. I got ex-military, Shell degree. I had no problem picking up an interview. Like I will say, like people were willing to pick up the phone and talk to me.
Yeah, great
And
background.
yeah, yeah. So I had an opportunity QEP resources when they existed. They're
Oh
like, yeah,
yeah, right,
you
right, right.
remember QEP? So I got to know their VP of production like through a mutual colleague, and he's like, "Oh, dude, I want you to come work for me. Like, come on." And
Hmm.
so brought me in an engineering role, and yeah, it kind of solidified myself. I think probably in the Denver oil and gas scene, right, working for an independent there, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
So
was like QEP. I always like QEP. They to me were, um, a little bit like what Equitable or EQT was for the Northeast, where it was a
Yeah.
diversified company, right? So there was um, Questar, right, and Salt Lake, and then they're like, well, we also have some oil and gas stuff, despite being like utility
Yeah, exactly.
and and all this, and so the culture was sort of like a bit independent from the big company, and then developed their own identity as like an independent operator, like you mentioned, operating in various different basins. Some really smart people I met over there. Shout out Mike Messer. I don't know if you know Mike. I really
Yeah,
liked.
oh, yeah, Mike and I,
Yeah,
lots of time doing tech stuff at QEP, totally.
yeah, super forward thinking, and ironically, um, he moved to Seattle, like to be with his. This isn't a Mike Messer podcast, but I'll have to send this to him.
I've talked to him, he's at still is he I wonder he's still at
Yeah, Mike.
Microsoft.
He's at
Yeah,
Microsoft, and I
yeah,
think I'm not going to take credit for this. I think he got the job on
you
his
can
own,
take credit.
but we were having lunch one day. This I don't know, this was 2017 or something like that, 2016, and he was saying, "Yeah, I want to move back to Seattle. My wife's from there. All this stuff." And I said, um, one of my fraternity brothers has worked at Microsoft like his entire career. Like I can set you up with him. And I think they connected. He got an interview and got a job. It may have been independent of that connection made, but I'd like to now take credit for Mike getting a job at
Yeah,
Microsoft. But nonetheless, it just shows you sort of like the caliber that they had on the technology side. Yeah, I thought they were really forward thinking. They moved fast for a company of its size, and I'm sure that was a good experience for you coming from a big operator like Shell, and then seeing how an independent works and a well respected one in Denver. So you do QEP, you're on the production side. Like you
yeah.
said, you've solidified your spot as like an oil and gas guy, both big and then, offshore, onshore, independent, and then they shut down the company.
And then they shut down the company. But it was, like, yeah, I got like through like I'm riding the wave of like acquisitions and divestitures at QEP, but it
Yeah,
was great. Like, I will say the beauty of like them pivoting was like I worked Pinedale, I worked Permian, I worked Haynesville, I did a little bit of North Dakota help with work. I helped a little bit in like got to learn a little bit about Uinta. Like they had so many assets in various areas.
yeah.
Like I got a flavor of like all these different basins in the US, which would end up being super helpful. Just kind of like talk the lingo and like have a little bit of connection anywhere. And like they lots of changes, lots of divestitures and in acquisitions and divestitures in there. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall what was happening there, and kind of reflecting back to my Shell experience of like oh your assets getting divested, like what are you gonna do type of thing.
Like
I
I've
jumped,
been there, done that. No
yeah,
problem.
I jumped the gun on that one, and I was probably whatever 4-ish years or so in there, and that's when BP set up shop at BPX had set
Yeah.
up shop
With that
and
awesome, awesome office in
yes.
the lower Highlands.
Yes. So I was like, well, I see what's happening. Like, how much is my runway here? What's going to happen with the company and the divestitures? And yeah, applied for a job and network, like typical thing, networked in and used some previous connections and said, okay, yeah, we're looking for production engineers. And yeah, BPX came a calling, man.
Ah, it's really neat. So you're now yeah, wow, okay, so I somehow didn't see, I feel like you might have told me this, but I always just pictured you more on the tech side because that's really where you've been now since BPX. So,
Yeah, yeah.
what were you doing within these production groups at oil and gas companies? Were you
Yeah, I think
focused on SCADA and tech? Like, what was your
Yeah, I think that's like a good like I think like QEP was really where like doing typical production engineering things like workovers and like artificial lift.
yeah,
But really I was like the Spotfire was just coming out. Like how many stories you've probably heard of people like, oh, I picked up Spotfire. That's where like I'm working with Mike Messer there and the IT guys and be like, how do I bring in all of our well failure data and my SCADA data and I do all these visualizations, right? It's
yeah,
the story of like, you know, 10 years ago when they're like, I want to start mashing up data and have insights, right? So
yep,
I just started building this stuff, right? Going online, writing R code and copying, pasting, and just like figuring out how I can make this a little easier for me. Part of that's what took me to BPX. Like they were like, yeah, we're all into this. Like this is like we're trying to redefine it.
cool,
You've heard all the thing. Like we're bringing to Denver. We're trying to get a tech and fun scene kind of thing happening and trying to
yeah,
redefine it. And So that's like, so you can see like that's where I'm drifting, Jeremy. Like that's where my love is. Like I'm doing production engineering, but it's really kind of the data side. And then when I was at BPX, um, so I'm working there, Wyoming. Like, it's still a gas company, right? It's Wamsutter, it's the Western Slope, it's
Hmm,
Oklahoma. They hadn't made the BHP acquisition yet, right? Where
sure.
they totally oily, and quickly got involved with a project with this company called Kelvin, who's doing this artificial lift stuff
Yep.
outside of there. Got involved, when sort of this into Wes Hamerpack, my buddy Wes. We
Yeah,
were
Wes
working
is
at
great, man. Shout out what, Task, right?
Task. Yeah, yeah,
Task.io.
yeah. So Wes and
Yeah.
I and Kenny and there's a crew of folks that kind of are working this Kelvin project, and Spencer was over there doing some cool stuff.
Guy's awesome. Love that guy.
So a handful of people we still kind of we still keep in touch, and so I got involved with this Kelvin project, and I was like, well, crap. I mean, I know about plunger lift. I've been doing this for many years. I know about SCADA. Like I've been messing
Yeah.
around with data. Like let's make this work. And so I kind of took project management reins of that, um and ran with that project. And yeah, like I think I'm always interested in people like, what the street thinks of Kelvin, and like the stories that like we ran an unbelievably, like it was the most successful oil and gas project I've ever, as far as value was delivered. Like we ran this and I mean, I'll be honest, we were probably 5 to 10 years ahead of like where they were, like what is happening now. And we were, no kidding, having algorithms sit in the cloud running plunger lift. And
Yeah. Yeah.
change is hard, Jeremy. Like there was a lot of like internal convincing, and it worked. And how do you look at the value, and what does it scale to?
Right.
And we kind of got rolled over the beast of BHP acquisition and selling the gas assets, and the company moving. Like big company stuff happening. Like I'm not like, it's not a bad thing. It's just like priorities change. And I ended up loving it so much. Um, got to know Peter, the CEO over there, and a few of the other folks, and they're like, "Why don't you just come work for us? Like,
Just come work for Kelvin. And you're
just
like,
come work for Kelvin."
yeah, nice. I can still stay in oil and gas, but I get to nerd out on the tech side.
I get to nerd out in tech, and yeah, so that was it, man. Yeah,
That's what you've been doing ever since. So you then could run more projects and work at more companies. And I see this a lot from people like my friends over at Novus Consulting or
yeah,
EAG or some of these companies where they worked at the Chesapeakes or Devon or BHP or whatever, and then they get into consulting or software and they realize, ooh, I can make impacts at a lot of companies, right? Not just
yeah,
one. Like I've got this like knowledge that I've gained and I've got this cool piece of technology and project management skills. Now I can do more and implement more solutions industry wide. So I could see where that was appealing for you, especially as like, to bring it back, like your kind of mindset as like a teacher, a bit of an educator, connector, and enjoying technology. I could see you really liking that. So then you take over at Calvin. What was your job over
I
there?
was a product manager.
Product
So
manager.
product manager, like, yeah, which again, like I would say, like learning experience of learning experiences, like military, oil and gas. Now I'm a
Yeah,
product manager at a startup,
sure.
and how do you work with a Portugal-based software team? How do you work with data scientists in
Yeah,
Australia? And like I always say, it was like in the midst of that, I had gone back to grad school and got my business degree, and like it was a second degree there. Like just the learning from the likes of like
sure.
Peter and like John Winnie, like he was the COO, like startup entrepreneurial guys going through a B round, like um, the Rice
Yeah.
brothers led the B round there at Kelvin,
Oh,
and
really?
getting
That's
them,
neat.
yeah, yeah, getting to know them, and like what does fundraising at that level look like?
Sure.
Um, it was an unbelievable experience there of how the market looks and the product and everything like that. So
Huh.
and like that was kind of the seeds of honestly like sales and business development, like looking at markets and strategies, and like what are you actually selling, and what does the market need? And so yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And you quickly learn. God, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday, and I know that my startup founder bosses, who are basically the people that fund futures, right? To stay in business, they hate hearing this, but it's the truth. It doesn't really matter what your product does. Like people don't really care on the buyer side. They care about what the value is to them. Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that you knew
I
coming from
do
the
coming
operator
from
side, but you really start to see this when you're
yeah.
implementing solutions, product management. You have all these cool ideas, but it comes back to like, well, what's it going to do for us? Right. Cause like I'm busy. I'm a production engineer or I'm a VP of production and I got wells going down right and left. And I got pumpers who are like sitting in their truck waiting for something to do. Like I got to optimize this stuff. I got to leverage cloud technology. I got to reduce cost. Like I got to make, how's your stuff going to help me with that?
Yep.
Right. And
Mhm.
it's a little bit sobering in some ways. Be like, but we built this thing that's just so cool. It's like, I don't care. Like, I need to know how this is going to create value for me and quickly. Right. So you saw that firsthand.
It's you see that, yeah, absolutely. Like they don't care about your story. They don't care about what you built. They care
Sorry,
about
man.
what you like. It's humbling, but it's also like, okay, that's like, yes, like change your mindset. Like, as opposed to being like a production engineer when I was in the company, it's like, oh, look what I built. This is great. Like now you're trying to sell it to someone. Like no, it's about the customer, right? And it rightfully should be. So, yeah, that's where it was laid in those product management days of of Kelvin. So
So yeah, so I think we met. You were still at Calvin, but then COVID happens, right? And things are getting quirky for the oil and gas industry as a whole. And then you ultimately, I think, left there, and you've worked at some smaller companies
I have,
since.
yeah. So very quirky, like yeah, COVID was just a like throw it up in
Devastating.
the air and let all the pieces fall, and so ended up leaving Calvin in the midst of COVID, and it's kind of like, well, shit, like what do you like? Like I
Now
can't
what?
even like we're not leaving the house. How am I supposed to find a job? Like what is going on?
Yeah.
I had like so many people. Like it is. And that's and I can't I started doing some independent consulting and but quickly met up with a colleague, Matt Hawker, runs Hawker Consulting,
Yep.
EPC firm, very entrepreneurial guy. And we got to chatting and, oil and gas guy, mines guy, just kind of the most genuine of wonderful people. And we had some history. He did a lot of engineering consulting when I was at QEP on the facilities side. So kind of, always were running into each other. And
Hmm.
the short of it, he was trying to bring a product to market. It was a multi-phase meter, like an IoT, an industrial IoT product. And um, it just like we just kind of hit it off. Like, hey, I built SaaS. I know what the market looks like. Like, here's how
Sure.
I would tackle it. Here's what I would look like. And so I started working for him. He basically had set up a separate company to house this product and like see what that could look like and see if we could bang away on bringing it. So it was even more early. It was like first sales stuff, right? He's funding it from his consulting business
Yep.
and like how do you make this viable? And so even more further upstream, kind of like that in the sales process.
Nice. Nice. So you help out a friend. I'm noticing you work with people that you like, right? That you have
Oh,
relationships
yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah.
That's the game. And then I guess after that you end up at True North, right?
I
Which is
I
where
do
you're
now.
at
We're getting
now.
full circle.
Yeah.
So in typical learning fashion, right, working with Matt and his team over there, right, and it takes a long time to bring a product to market in oil and gas. A long time, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why venture capital and private dollars exist to make that happen. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, ended up leaving there. Was doing some independent consulting just on like product marketing and like kind of leveraging what I did in energy tech. Like how do you have strategy fit? And it was through my time had met one of the principals at True North, True North system OT
Mhm.
system integrator, and they were essentially looking for like true business development help in Denver. So it's a Calgary and Denver based company, and trying to grow in the U.S. And made sense. Okay, let's do this. Let's bring me on, and I'll
Sure.
help you grow the U.S. business. I know, and this is like traditional. I don't want to say traditional, but like OT integration, SCADA systems, PLC programming, and like that's a world I've lived in and know it, and keenly have, like you said, know the problems and know, okay, this is how you sell it. This is how you resonate. This is what's happening, and this is what can be type of thing.
Yeah, you know what well, you have a very, very good idea of what the person that's sitting across the table from you cares about, right? So you
Totally.
immediately can start to talk their language versus just being a sales guy. Huge, huge value add for somebody that's in kind of a sales role. So really fascinating background. I think it's great. We are coming up somewhat on time, and I'm sure you've got your phones blowing up, and mine is too. But I have a couple more questions I want to
Go
ask
for
you before I let you go. And one is, and I put this in the prep questions. I always find this answer to be interesting from people. Like, what advice would you give to your younger self? And maybe it's not do anything different. Maybe it's like, your path is your path and it all sort of makes sense now. But if you were to go talk to like the 21-year-old version of yourself or even the 26-year-old version of yourself that
it.
just got out of the military, like, what would you tell them?
Um, these are such great questions you reflect. It's authenticity, Jared. How do you, and I think we all go through this, but how do you get quicker to really discovering who you are, right? And just owning that and loving it in every bits of pieces. Like that's gonna find your direction's gonna find itself if you know yourself. And you are gonna attract and surround yourself with people that you love and resonate and make you better the more you are authentic to your own self and you know yourself. And I think, I would I do it differently? No. Would I love to accelerate that journey and be even more present and authentic and at 25 or 26 and making
Yeah.
decisions that you can? Absolutely, man. I think that's like that is I would say like that is my journey now every single day. And you know, to tell my 25-year-old to like get on that journey now, man, because that's a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you're talking about something that people struggle with their whole lives though. And I
100%.
actually left with a similar feeling. I went to the Hoffman Institute. I love talking about that on this podcast. Hoffman should sponsor this podcast, the amount that I talk about it and the amount of attention that they get for it. But
How
um
do we make that happen? We can make that happen, right?
yeah, they I went out to this week long retreat in Northern California and without getting too deep into the details, like it is truly about finding your authentic self, right? Like who you really are, and in a lot of ways, just accepting that and accepting your past and everything that kind of led you up to where you're at today. And there were these people, I was like 41 or 42, something like that. And there were people in there who were like in their 20s. And I like all I could say to them was like good for you to
Yeah.
do this now, right? Like I couldn't have afforded it back then. It would have been like 2 months salary or something like that for what I was making at that age. But nonetheless, like the same kind of advice that you just gave is like just find your authentic self. Like just accept who you are, warts and all. Like it's okay. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think the sooner you accept that, the sooner, like you said, you attract people who are like-minded and like you, and aren't trying to be something that they're not. So I like that answer, and it's just so authentically you. I also want to share one quick story. Um, you've been there for me. And I don't know if you know this or not, but like when I was really having a hard time, especially um, losing Tim, right? My
Yeah.
podcast co-host, also a Air Force brat. His dad was in the Air Force, so some commonalities there. I
Yeah.
thought of him a
Yeah.
lot in the first 15 minutes of this podcast when you're telling your story. But I remember you called me up. You were in a car. This would have been 2022, and you're like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm not doing well. My podcast partner has cancer. He's about to die. Uh, yeah, I'm not great." And you go, "Send me your address. I'll be there. Be right there." I'm like, "Shut up, dude." You're like, "No, I'm serious. Let's go. Let's go to lunch. I'll buy you lunch." I'm like, "Fine." I send you my address. You show up at my house 20 minutes later. I
Yeah.
guess you had like a free block of time. We went up the hill to Stem Ciders and had lunch, and that meant a lot to me, and just shows me like who you are, right? That I know you had other things going on. You got a couple kids, right? One of them's got special needs and requires a lot of attention. And here you are hearing me out that I'm not in a good place and going through real life things. And you come out here, right? And I think
Totally.
that's who you are. And I've just always admired that about you and appreciate your support, our friendship, and where it can grow from here. So just wanted to share that and say thank you for doing
No,
that.
I appreciate it. We'll keep the love going. I love the message. Like that's what life's about, like, right? It's everything else can wait. And I love your like the message and your openness of like what you've gone like we need more of that. Especially, I will say, I feel like men in our 40s, like, we've talked a lot about
Yeah.
where, like, how we want to show up, what's better, meditation, like all of these practices in life that make us better fathers and professionals and partners.
Yep.
So keep preaching the word, man, because it's through that people open up and are willing to say, yeah, I mean, I'm going through a lot too. How I need help, and
Yeah,
that's
that's
priceless.
okay. That's okay. Weakness is a strength, and I truly believe that, showing that you do need help, because that beats the alternative. Anyways, where can people find you, man? Your social media profiles, your company, all that stuff. Where's Jared Hoover at?
Jared Hoover, yeah, typical social media stuff, man. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, or I will say our company website, True North. Uh, Maybe when this podcast airs, we're doing a whole rewrite of the website, which has been super fun. So
All
maybe
right.
it'll be up and running. You can find me that way. But yeah, ping me on LinkedIn. I'm on there every day. Typical professional networking sales stuff, right? That's where we sometimes live and die on stuff.
Yeah, it's true. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, probably too much, but I get value from it. So, um,
Sure.
Jared Hoover, you are the man. I appreciate you coming on. What the funk today, my guy.
Thank you, man, very much. Take care.